Hello, and welcome back, y'all, to I Can't Eat Shit podcast. I'm your host, actress, comedian Shondalia White. And yes, you guessed it, I can't eat shit. And yes, of course, the shit is annoying. Am I a doctor? No. I'm just a woman when you take her out to eat, she can't eat anything on the menu 90% of the time. So, if you're like me and you can't eat shit, this podcast is for you. If you got a little bit older and that good ain't gutting, because that's what's going to happen, this podcast is for you too. And if you're just interested in me and my health and wellness journey and want to be nosy, we love nosy people here. This podcast is for you too, so stay tuned and learn something. I started I Can't Eat Shit podcast because I was secretly ill for many years, and now I'm healed and I'm ready to talk about it. This episode is about why gluten-free is for me. So let's get into it. I have a confession to make. I have never been a bread lover. There, I said it. It's a thing. I know people love bread, but I've never been a huge fan of it. And I always thought it was weird that a lot of people in my family needed a piece of bread with every meal. I'm like, why? What is it doing? I was one of those kids, you can give me crackers. I'll take crackers over bread any day. And I like the Lunchables and stuff like that. So sandwiches and stuff like that had never been my thing. Even wraps, like I've never been a huge fan of stuff like that. So it wasn't surprising to me that I adapted a gluten-free diet. But what was surprising to me is that I later developed an autoimmune response to gluten. So let's just backtrack a little bit, because when I was little, I never had any reactions to gluten like that. I don't remember anything, and I would be curious if I was having something, but we just didn't know about it because back then we weren't educated on it. But cut to my 20s, and I am starting to have reactions to some liquors and beers because I'm hitting it up, right? And if you didn't know, most beer has gluten in it, and also a lot of liquors have wheat in it, so it's some form of gluten in it. But yeah, then we cut to some years later, and it got progressively worse, and now I'm noticing like maybe I should try a gluten-free diet. And I can't remember if it was the reactions that were making me try it, or I don't think it was severe reactions yet. I think it was like I wanted to fix my skin or something like that. It was something along those lines, but it wasn't like, oh, I've been having severe reactions. But I was having some reactions to, it was the bloating, I think, too. So anyway, I decided to adapt a gluten-free diet. And one day I'm out having lunch with one of my homegirls, and we're talking about me adapting to this new diet. And she's like, oh, I did that, and I had to do it because I have a gluten sensitivity. And she went through all these different things and finally found out that that's what it was. And I was like, really? Oh, and she's like, yeah, so do you just have like a gluten sensitivity, or do you have celiac disease? And I was like, oh, I actually don't know. What's the difference? And as she's telling me what the difference is, I'm literally falling apart. Like, I'm sweating. I'm dizzy. I feel nauseous. My stomach starts cramping. Then it's like severe pain. Like, I don't wish it on anybody kind of pain. So much so that I couldn't even stay sitting there. And I was down for 3 days after that. And that became my new reaction to gluten. Now, what happened, because I ordered something that was gluten-free to my knowledge, but what she brought to my attention is that even though this was a dish that it was like salmon, veggies, and rice, she was like, even though that stuff is normally gluten-free, if they use soy sauce is not gluten-free. And I was like, oh my gosh. And that's exactly what happened. I had a huge reaction to it. So what in the world is gluten to begin with? Gluten is a protein that's in cereal grains and wheat and rye, stuff like that. And it's responsible for that like elastic texture that you see in dough. And a lot of people have reactions to it. Somehow it's either like a sensitivity or full-blown celiac, right? And what was happening to me is my body started basically eating itself. I had no idea that it would respond that way. Like, I just wasn't as educated as I am now. So my body was responding as if it needed to protect me at all costs, and just like something foreign was in there, and just we gonna attack your body. It's attacking itself. This later became and developed into me having a hole in my stomach lining, and it became the cause behind my malabsorption and IBS problems and constipation, diarrhea, you name it. It was responsible for a lot of that stuff. And I later found out that I have a genetic marker for celiac disease. I did not know this. Now, I think most of the time when people have a genetic marker, it actually doesn't, if they have only one, they don't necessarily develop celiac disease. But if you have both, you definitely have it. Like, I think that they're probably born with it. I only had one. So I think that might be why I later developed it, like slowly developed it, because I was eating nothing but gluten, and gluten is in every dang on thing. So it's no surprise. So what is celiac disease? Celiac disease is a chronic inflammatory disease where your body is having an immune reaction to gluten, autoimmune disease. And there is no cure for it. Yay, so fun. We have so much fun with this. So I thought that the Healthy Women magazine did a great job of explaining the difference between celiac disease and gluten sensitivities. So I'm just going to read it here. I kind of summarized it a bit just to make it shorter. But gluten intolerance can overlap with celiac disease symptoms. For example, if you are sensitive to gluten, you may experience GI symptoms like bloating, constipation, diarrhea, and stomach cramps. It may be that you can eat a certain amount of gluten before you experience any sort of symptoms. So your symptoms will be tied to the amount of gluten you ate and how long ago you ate it, right? But when you have celiac disease, you can have a crumb of gluten and your body is going to go nuts. It's reacting immediately. And the system is having an immune reaction, and it lasts for days, like, for example, with me. And the inflammation can be seen in blood tests after weeks. So it's just kind of, I don't wish this stuff on nobody. It's so frustrating, and it's really a lot. I got sick of the shits, and I'm going to tell you what I did about it. So as I said, I got sick of the shits, and I went ahead and did something about it. And the first thing I did was eliminate gluten. I had to completely eliminate it out of my diet because that is the only cure for celiac disease. They don't actually have a cure, as I mentioned in the last segment. And they suggest that you just eliminate it out your diet and do your best to not have a reaction. So much fun, seems so simple, but it's not, because everything has gluten in it. Everything. I'm talking about snacks. I'm talking about shit that's not even supposed to have gluten in it. Ice cream. If you do fried foods, if you do some vegetables, and I'm like, soybeans be having gluten in it. Like, what are y'all doing? Why is that even in there? So I'm not sure why it's an additive, if it's like a thickening agent or whatever it is, but it's in everything. So it's very difficult, depending on where you are located, especially, to have a gluten-free diet. But I figured it out, and I'll share some of the things that I've learned to do to help me not have some sort of reaction. Side note, like 95% of things at restaurants has gluten in it. Some sort of trace of gluten, some gluten contaminant, cross-contamination. So if you are dealing with celiac or gluten sensitivity, do your research so you don't get sick when you get to the restaurant, because a lot of times people are not educated. And I'll kind of go into that when I go over my list of things that I've done. So again, the first thing I did was avoid gluten at all costs. The second thing that I did was do some research and learning ingredients in general. So I wanted to understand how things were made. And what I will do, say, for example, if I go get sushi, there are some things that naturally don't have gluten, and then there's some things that naturally have gluten in it, right? I would research how this type of sushi dish is made and see if it has gluten in it before I even go. And or if I'm there, I will look up all the stuff to see what are they doing to make this, like how do you make this particular thing, so that I know not to eat it and I can avoid it, and or ask them if they can take that particular thing out that has gluten in it. I know it feels extensive, but if you've ever dealt with celiac disease, you understand it's worth it. So that was a really big thing for me, and now I'm kind of familiar just with a lot of different dishes where I'm like, when I hear that word, I know that that is likely a dish that has gluten, and I'll avoid it, or I'll ask for a modification. Okay, the next one is I started making everything from scratch. Thank goodness I love to cook, because I started making everything from scratch. And when I say I make it from scratch, I make it from scratch. My cousin was just visiting me recently, and he was just like, "Oh, you're actually going to juice this by hand. You're not going to buy juice." And I'm like, "Yeah, I just went to the fruit tree and I grabbed one off the tree and I juice it myself." That's how extensive I am with eating things from scratch. Because what I found is those additives, all those they have so many different additives and secret additives in groceries at the store, that it's just easier to just buy things separately and make it myself. So I don't buy soups. I make a soup. I make the broth. I don't buy a broth like a veggie broth. I make veggie broth out of veggies and water and other ingredients. If I need chicken broth, I'm making chicken broth. I'm gonna get the chicken, boil it up, make the whole thing. I'm literally making it from scratch, and that started helping immensely as I was healing my gut, because I wasn't dealing with additives anymore, and my stomach wasn't having that inflammation reaction that it was normally having. Another thing I started doing is stop buying pre-made products, period. Like I was talking about with like the what I said, like the veggie broth and the chicken broth, that was an example. But even down to pre-made meals and ice cream that's not like made from scratch. Like I do make ice cream from scratch. I know I'm so extensive, but there are some brands that have a gluten-free, dairy-free, and I have like the very specific ones, or I just go to an actual ice cream parlor where they're making the ice cream, and I know what they're putting in it. And I do ask for the ingredient list, because I started going to an ice cream parlor that was in Hollywood, and I knew instantly when they changed their ingredients. I was like, this thing used to taste like this, so what they start doing? I talked to one of the workers, and she's like, "Oh yeah, so some stuff is being pre-made out of the ice cream shop, and that stuff has gluten. And then this stuff is that we make in the shop always is gluten-free, dairy-free." You know what I mean? Like, are you gonna tell some people? So it's very frustrating. As you can see, I get pissed off, but like, it's very frustrating. And I'm just telling you, even when you're used to going to a place, go behind these people, because because I understood that some things, in order to make it, it would be gluten and this and that. It helped me be able to spot the changes and everything when they change their menu. And it's for money, and I get it. As a business owner and stuff, I get that you have to cut costs, but for the sake of health, you have to double check these people. Okay, so the next thing is when I go out, I order a la carte. Most of the time, if I'm going to a restaurant, I won't even eat out, to be honest. But if I do, I will check in advance to see if they have something like that. Is it a la carte, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. They have that menu. I'll double check, and then I will ask them what oils they use, because I have issues with oils. What type of spices or seasonings they use on something, and can I get it without that, or can I customize it? And most of the time they'll let you do it, or they'll just cook it in some oil and give it to you with salt on it. And sometimes it'd be flavorful. I'm like shocked. I'm like, oh, I wonder what they doing with that oil. But anyway, that is very, very helpful if you're dealing with restrictions and you still want to go out and try different things. Another thing is just ordering like sides. So sometimes it'll be a bunch of like veggies on the side menu. Or a typical thing that most people do is French fries. I don't do that because, most French fries are not gluten-free. If you didn't know that, when you go out to restaurants, most of it is not gluten-free. you have to ask if it is dipped in a gluten-free fryer. I know, just add to the list of things that shouldn't have gluten in it that do. And I will say the last thing is researching gluten-free alternatives. So, for example, you got like gluten-free pastas and gluten-free this and that. You can request some of those things at restaurants. But just understanding the options for the alternatives is important, I think, because they're based, some are veggie based, some are not veggie based. And, you know, you just kind of have to play around and learn that type of thing again, so that you can ask the questions you need to ask and get the results you want to get. Let me tell you, I am not an expert I've gotten so much better, but I am not an expert in food necessarily. I'm just very educated in food because of all the issues that I've had with it. And I understand it is extremely frustrating and difficult to constantly have to adjust your diet. People don't understand it. They get attitudes with you as if you don't have an attitude already because you got to do this shit to begin with. And it can be very frustrating, which is one of the reasons I started my cooking segment, There's Another Way to Do That, where I modify recipes based on my restrictions, because I wanted to show people when you have restrictions, you can still have fun with food. It was a time I did not have fun with food. I could barely hold down anything. And I understand like how limiting it can be when it's not just gluten. It's this, it's that, it's this and that. It's like, what can I eat, right? It is light at the end of the tunnel, and there are ways that you can have fun with food and change that relationship to food. And hopefully my cooking segments can help you out. And hopefully those suggestions are going to help you out in the future. If they do, please let me know. This segment is called There's Another Way to Do That, where I teach you how I modify recipes based on my restrictions. So today we're making lettuce wrapped turkey burgers. It is oh so good and oh so juicy. Your girl figured out a way to hook it up. Now, I know that's not usually the case. A lot of people don't like turkey burgers because turkey burgers are usually really, really dry. They're flavorless, and it just make you sleepy because turkey be making you fall out. You know what I mean? But I went through a point in my life where I couldn't even eat regular ground beef because the natural oils were hurting my stomach too much. So I had to cut it out my diet. And your girl learned how to get really, really good with the turkey meat. One thing I will say is I use regular ground turkey meat, not the turkey breast meat. It's the ground turkey breast meat. I don't use that one because I have found that one is pretty dry. So unless you have some sort of restriction and you have to use that, I do suggest that you use the regular ground turkey meat. Go to the link in the description, or it'll pop up above, or check it out on my TikTok. That's where all of my other cooking segments are as well. Of course, you can check it out here on YouTube, like I said. And everything that I make is gluten-free, dairy-free. It's seasoned, but it's not spicy because your girl can't do that. Check it out. Let me know how you love it. If you're dealing with any sort of gluten sensitivity or celiac disease, do yourself a favor and get rid of that shit. Take it out your diet. Eliminate it, okay? It's doing you a disservice, and it's just something you do not want to hold on to. You will feel so much better, so much lighter, and bonus, if this will get you to do it, you lose weight. You lose weight from not being bloated and all that extra stuff. You know what I mean? The longer you take to take care of anything that's going on with your body, the longer it will cause long-term dysfunction. So let's get rid of it, and we trying to avoid all of that. Take it from me. Take care of your body so it can take care of you, or you're going to be dealing with a lot of shit. This has been I Can't Eat Shit Podcast. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I really appreciate you all as usual, and I welcome your comments and any sort of questions you may have. If you like what you saw and or heard today, go ahead and like, share, subscribe I Can't Eat Shit Podcast on YouTube and wherever you stream your podcast. You can also check out my full cooking episodes, There's Another Way to Do That, where I teach you how to modify recipes based on my restrictions on TikTok and on YouTube. And you can also follow I Can't Eat Shit Podcast on Instagram, or follow me at Shondalia White. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time.
I Can't Eat Shit!
I Can't Eat Shit podcast is not a replacement for a medical professional. If you need help, seek out a trained medical professional, nutritionist, or therapist to help you with your specific needs.